The Spook Who Sat by the Door, the fictional account of the first CIA drive for African American agents, was published by Margaret Busby under Allison Busby Publishers in 1969. Sam Greenlee tried to publish the book in the US, but was rejected until he and Margaret crossed paths. The controversial film was screened at the British Film Institute in summer 2012.
200 years of the abolition of the slave trade. It was the first event we put on at the BFI as an African Odysseys. In fact, no, it wasn't the first. The first event was a Cuban film we showed called The Last Supper. But when we kicked off the programme properly, we showed Goodbye Uncle Tom. And we had people queuing around the block to see it. Colin Prescott chaired. Anyway, that's a bit of background. The other film that was requested again and again, that we finally got around to seeing, and it hasn't been easy that was the best copy you saw today. We showed that from a tape, that wasn't shown from a DVD. That's the best copy there is, and everything that the documentary said is true. That film, you know, people attempted to suppress that film. It was never really given its due, and it was a remarkable film, and so it was made for no money at all, etc. So the other film mentioned was Spook Who Sat by the Door. Can we see the Spook Who Sat by the Door? And really, this is the point at which I should introduce Margaret Busby. Margaret Busby from Allison Busby Publishing. Margaret was the first publisher for the Spook Who Sat by the Door. And as I mentioned before, the film probably the person responsible for that film being made. It couldn't get the novel. Sam Greenlee was refused publishing in the US. He came to the UK, and I'm going to hand over to Margaret and ask you to tell us a story, I suppose. Yeah.
Where to start? Can you hear me? Am I holding it in the right place?
A bit closer.
Yeah. Closer?
Yeah.
Is that better?
Yeah.
Well, I have to start by saying The Spook Who Sat by the Door was the first novel that I published. It was published in 1969. I know, I'm very old. But I have to say that Allison Busby, the publishing company, was actually conceived when I was still at university. I went to university when I was 17 actually, and I graduated when I was 20, so you can see that I was still pretty young. In fact, when I first was introduced to Sam, and I heard he was in his 30s, I thought, gosh, he is so old. But anyway, what had happened was that I had started this, as I said, Allison Busby was conceived when I was still at university. We started out publishing in 1967 with 3 paperback poetry books. We had no distribution. Our distribution was to stop people in the street saying, do you want to buy a book? Or knocking on doors saying, do you want to buy a book? We had no knowledge of what publishing entailed. The books were sent on an electric typewriter. We had no money. Clive Allison was my business partner. I was actually married I wasn't married to Allison, I was married to a jazz musician called Alan Brixton. So, I mean, in those days you went out with somebody a couple of times, you got married. So I was married when I was about 22, I think. And what had happened, that having started this publishing venture with these 3 poetry books, a friend of my then husband had bumped into this guy on a Greek island in Mykonos, called Sam Greenlee, a guy who had this novel. Everybody had turned it down. He'd been trying to get it published for years. And this friend, who was called Alexis Lickiard, he lives in Exeter. Sorry, he couldn't be here. He said, oh, I know somebody who started a publishing company. So he sent Sam to see me in London. I borrowed £50 to give to Sam so he could stay in London. I could work on the manuscript with him. And Clive Allison and I decided this was the book we were going to go full-time with. We left our jobs. I was doing all sorts of other jobs. I had a job in the publishing company. I had a program on the BBC African service called Grateful Women. I was doing a television thing for the Central Office of Information, just to piece together a living and support my broke husband. And so we left our jobs and we thought, gosh, this is a really stunning manuscript. I'd worked on it with Sam, and we thought, here's a book we ought to get serialised in a national newspaper. So we sent the manuscript to the Observer saying, this fantastic first novel, would you like to serialise it? No, I'm not doing any bit better. They sent it back to us saying, well, you should know that we don't serialise fiction, and if we did, it wouldn't be a Black Power first novel like this. Okay, so we wouldn't take no for an answer. So we sent it back to them saying, listen, you're wrong. It's a good book. And they ended up extracting it in the Observer magazine. And so it became our first book. We sold translation rights to all sorts of languages, Japanese, Dutch, French, Italian. We sold it back to America, sold American rights to an American publisher. We knew nothing about royalties, so when the publisher said we're going to give us 4%, we thought, okay, not knowing we're being ripped off. And that's how it started. And Sam remains, I'm in touch with him, he lives in Chicago now. The book was what somebody said called a succeder name drop. It was reviewed everywhere. In fact, this is the original hardback copy that I published in 1969. I did does anybody remember Letraset? Letraset?
Yes.
Yes. I did this cover for Letraset. we sent the manuscript to get, we got quotes from people. It says on the back, a sudden revolution of love, bitterness and bloodshed. The Spook set my door. An important original nitty-gritty book, said Dick Gregory. CIA needs a Negro. There have been accusations of racial discrimination. So Black Dan Freeman. Actually, Freeman, I ought to say, the name Freeman, Sam told me once he chose because Morgan Freeman is a cousin of his. So Black Dan Freeman begins his lone career in an all-white world. Dan Freeman, tame, conspicuous, harmless. But behind the mask, he coolly develops his subversive expertise in judo, guns, women's strategy. Moving as easily among Washington's power-hungry politicians as among the threatening street gangs of Chicago's ghetto, Freeman plays the heroes of one world against the victims of another. The top men in the CIA, hypocritical social workers, brainwashed policemen, a middle-class girlfriend, a beautiful whore, tough young junkies, all have their place in Freeman's lethally calculated program. He uses and manipulates all the opportunities and people around him. He's a man with a foot in both camps. I remember writing this. And a foot in both camps and a finger squeezing clearly on the trigger. There is no time for sentimentality. Anyway, Sam Greenlee has written a novel about a revolution that may happen tomorrow. So that was it. And then when we did the paperback some years later, I decided to take all the best or worst adjectives out of the reviews. And so the back of this paperback says, explosive, Daily Express, exciting, Sunday Telegraph, terrifying, Bristol Evening Post, great, Morning Star, blueprint for Black Revolution, Daily Mail, disturbing, Birmingham Post, brilliant, BBC Overseas Service, terrifying, Irish Times, powerful, East Indian Press, explosive, Radio Zambia, brilliant, Irish Press, exciting, Punch, exciting, Luton Evening Post, exciting, South Wales Argus, very exciting, Northern chilling, Observer, frightening, the Times Educational Supplement, compulsive, Books and Bookman, devastating, Illustrated London News, frightening, Glasgow Herald, frightening, World Jury, remarkable, Sydney Morning Herald, deadly, Newsweek, seditious, Sunday Times, hair-raising, Melbourne Age, exciting, The Listener, a thriller of the first order, Adelaide Advertiser, frightening, Scotsman, sulphurous, Liverpool Daily Post, sensational, Hull Daily Mail. So that was the sort of response it got.
Attention and serious attention. I mean, the script, the print you watched this afternoon is the best copy. You know, we're film goers. We know that a film should have a cleaned up soundtrack. It should glitch. It deserves it. That can be done. It costs money, but so that's and it's a crime if it isn't done because it's an important film. It costs people their livelihoods. It's not in the history books. So the film history books, unlike the statement at the beginning of the documentary, don't pay enough attention to it. Certainly not in the UK. The press wouldn't cover this event. You know, they were told about it. They were given an article with information that they could have used. So the film itself needs
continues to be a problem.
more attention.
Well, who can fix it? What do you do?
We
Who has the
lobby.
rights?
We lobby. So we lobby. So the rights holder changed this year. Tim Reed held it until February. He's handed it back to Ivan Dixon's daughter. So perhaps we should be contacting her in the first instance, and then, you know.
Is there a chance we'll show it again then? In Black Jacobin, his famous book. So there were books that we were publishing and writers we were publishing that we believed should get a wider audience. And Sam's book fell into that category. And I think because Sam was closely involved with the making of the film, it actually reflects the book quite well.
I think you should all try and get a copy of the book. Okay, there's a question back here. Okay, someone has got the book on Amazon.
Thank you. First, I'd like to congratulate you for being part of publishing the book. It's a very powerful book and a very powerful film. I just wanted to ask you, you talked about it conveyed a message. I just wanted to ask you what you felt the message was in the context of the film back in 1973 and what that now means for us today.
What was the context? Well, I'm not sure. I mean, in that was an era. The civil rights era was not far distant. The civil rights movement was still current. It was there were many messages. A message to do with self-empowerment, to do with solidarity with each other. I can't sort of bring it down to something simple because it's quite complex. I mean, some things were quite contradictory. There wasn't a very great female presence, for example, in the film, and you know, that's the nature of the way society was at that point. I published other books which were part of that whole. In fact, I've got here a photocopy of some of the titles of that era. The black titles, because it wasn't only black books I was publishing. Here, apart from Spook, we published a book called Die Nigger Die by H. Rat Brown. He was, at a certain time, he was the Minister of Justice for the Black Panthers. There's another book published by Julius Lester called Look Out Whitey, Black Guys Don't Get Your Mama. These were books published in the early 70s, late 60s. Books on jazz, like Val Wimmer's Jazz People. I was just at Val's house this morning. Ishmael Reed, Yellow Black Radio Broke Down. So there were various books coming out of Black America, which were quite powerful in different ways, and were putting across quite a subversive message sometimes. Certainly one that couldn't be ignored. And yeah, I was about 2.5 at the time, and buying into all of that. Expected now to see how in the film you saw how an incident triggered off a riot, you know, the death of a black man, and you end up with a riot.
Which was one of the reasons why the film has had a troubled sort of appearance at the BFI as well.
Well, as you can see from all those reviews I put, it got reviewed everywhere. But I think it was considered more as something that happened over there. So people didn't feel that threatened by it. I think they just saw it as an American problem. It's both a thriller and a tract on the American nightmare. As a thriller, it's good and fast and exciting. As a tract, it has the by now familiar characteristics of Black American polemic writing, urgency and anger, concern for human dignity. That's what the Financial Times said. So I think because it was over there, it got more publicity here than it would have got over there.
Thank you.
Published by us.
Well, would they publish something like this book was at the door today?
Well, I don't know what their policy is, but it certainly is not it has no black presence, so no black people in it. It's owned by a Spanish publisher. They publish a lot of genre fiction, detective thriller.
Hey, and as far as he was concerned, imminently the US will see considerable civil insurrection. This was a dangerous film, and this was a film that shouldn't be shown. He thought it would be better to show positive films and positive roles. So it's hard to, and I think that's one of the for me anyway, one of the messages of the film is that it isn't about black and white. It's about something else. But
Jobs, he's had a hard life probably because of having written the Spook. So he's faced a lot of walls, a lot of problems. He has no money, he has nowhere to live, so he's paid the price for having written that book, and he's tried to do other books, and there were other books he published, collections of poetry and so on, but he never had a flourishing writing career.
just as an addition to that, he was in touch. He was very much aware of what the African Odysseys group were doing and their ambitions to show the film. He was absolutely delighted when there was a problem, when Ivan Dixon's daughter took over the rights to the film, and she wasn't sure whether, she wanted to reconsider what the plan, the marketing plan and the business plan for the project was. He intervened and said, as far as I'm concerned, show the film, show it from a DVD. If you don't get permission, it shouldn't be shown. And he was thrilled, and we'll be letting him know that it's shown today. And so that's just.
He may, I don't do Facebook, but he may be on Facebook.
He is on Facebook.
Perhaps people should Facebook him and
He does, yeah.
We should send them all a thank you. Everybody should sign a thank you for that.
It could definitely, it could be streamed online, and you could have an interactive thing with him.
The film is online. I mean, it's just not the same. But those of you who like online, you can get a kind of.
In some way I made a difference. But one of the best things that somebody ever said about Alison Busby was that you never knew what they were going to do next, but you knew it was going to be interesting. And we published fiction, we published non-fiction, we published, we had a political series in which we published, as I said, people like C.L.R. James, we published translations, we republished people like George Lamming who were out of print. We also published science fiction of a writer like Michael Moorcock. We published a writer called Hunter Thompson. We published lots of people who were at that point quite subversive, contentious, and I'm glad we did. And actually seeing in the audience James Barner, I like there's something I sometimes see on his email that says, "Plant trees under which you will never sit." So I hope I've planted a few trees like James under which I will never sit. Something more. James.
Thank you very much for inviting me. In fact, I feel...
Maurice Bishop, you may have heard of him. But then I didn't take the exams, I became a publisher instead. So, I should have been a lawyer or a doctor, but here I am.
Margaret's pictures are as good as mine.
All of you, and you have made a very important contribution, not only on this side of the Atlantic, not only on the other side of the Atlantic, but worldwide. I really want to know from you, I haven't had the privilege of ever meeting Sam Greenlee. Does he realise what he has done? Does he realise the love and the respect that he has? Or does he feel that he, in fact, has failed?
Well, I don't think he thinks he's failed. He knows the price he's had to pay. And I do think people should let him know via whatever means they can. That people should let him know that we still do appreciate him. In fact, Sam's birthday is the 13th of July. I always remember that. It's the same birthday as another friend of mine, Earl Lovelace, actually. And Wadeshienka, I think. 13th of July is obviously a good day for writers. I don't know how Facebook, can you just, if you're on Facebook, do you just send people messages saying, hello, I liked your film, or I liked your book? There you go, that's what to do.